Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Market Dominators Real Estate Podcast on the Market Dominators Team YouTube channel. We implore you to like and subscribe. Hit that like
Please
button.
visit, like, subscribe, hit the little bell so you get notifications. We upload every week.
Yes.
Check us out.
Yes. I am the original Market Dominator Associate Real Estate Broker, Mr. John Spascheck, and I am here with me is Mr. Scott Catillus, the #1 buyer's agent in Western New York,
Hey,
award-winning
everybody.
agent.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here today. Listen, I always say, no matter where you are, where you're listening, what you're doing, we appreciate you being here, giving us your ears while we educate you on the market and give you award-winning strategies to dominate in this market. So thanks for being here with us.
Yes. And the Market Dominators, we take a very specific approach to the business.
Mm-hmm.
And we seek to really educate. It's a very educational approach, but we educate, then we advocate, we negotiate, and we dominate. That's what we do here. And we are here dressed in new Market Dominator swag. Okay.
Black on black.
Yeah, black on black. That's cool swag right there, let me tell you.
Love it.
We were able to hand out some of this amazing swag at our client appreciation event. We had a family bowling night.
Gave away a ton of good stuff. We did a raffle. We had prizes, bowling, food. Clients got to meet each other. It was a ton of fun. It was a ton of fun.
That's pretty cool because clients get to meet each other too. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. They could share, swap stories and experiences.
Yeah.
Everybody got a Market Dominators mug.
Look at that.
A Market Dominators t-shirt.
Yep.
And then we gave away all kinds of prizes. We gave away a signed autographed football from Emmanuel Sanders.
Yeah.
Buffalo Bill that we gave away. We gave away 2 club seats for a Bills game to this upcoming season. So these are, little prizes. These are serious prizes. But that's how much we love our clients.
Love them.
We are
appreciative.
Grateful for our clients, man. They are the lifeblood of what we do. We love to serve them. And so we just are so happy that we could, we're just so blessed that we can actually get together and take some time on a Saturday evening and go to Strikers Bowling Alley, which is a phenomenal facility. By the way, that was just awesome experience there. Great food, great bowling activity, great seating and space, and just had a great time.
Yeah.
It's a really good time.
It was great.
Yeah. And for those who may not know, we had breaking news last week. Jim Roberts of Metro Roberts Realty, the fastest growing real estate company in Western New York. We announced last week that, boom, we came to an agreement with Metro Roberts Realty to work together. And we are now have joined forces. And we are wildly excited to be partnering with Jim and his great company, and family owned and operated, and just really, really awesome.
Yeah.
So,
we're stoked.
Yeah. So that was also breaking news. We are working through some incredible things about houses, and that is the 6 majors to a house.
6 majors, 3 mechanical, 3 structural. We compare them to a human body. We keep it super simple, very straightforward for people. Everybody has a head. Every house has a roof. We have a torso. House has the living space. We've got legs. House has a foundation. Those are the structural. The mechanical, we have a breathing system. We breathe in, we exhale. House has heating, sometimes cooling. Systems look a little different, but every house has them, right? We have a digestive system. A house has a plumbing system, and we have a nervous system, and a house has an electric system.
Bam!
So we check those systems out. They're big, they're major, they cost a lot of money. And when you're making probably the biggest purchase, biggest investment of your life, we got to make sure you're protected and you know what you're getting into.
Because we love our clients and we love you. Have an awesome
we appreciate
home.
You. Yeah.
So with that said, we covered in week 1 the roof or the head, right? And how that thing needs to breathe, different types of shingles, insulation, different types of venting. Then we went on last week and we covered the center, the torso of the house, right?
Yep.
The windows, walls, doors, and floors.
Mm-hmm.
And this week is very critical because we're talking about the basement or the foundation.
Yeah, the legs. I'll tell you what, when I'm showing people houses, like this is like my favorite thing to do.
Really?
You know? Yeah, seriously. Cause we walk it, we look at the outside. We always, unless it's like freezing cold, we always look at the outside first. And then we go in and we check out the inside, and they're going to fall in love with the inside. But then I always say, guys, we got to go down in the basement and we got to do what you call, and I love it, the autopsy, where we're going into the basement. 4 of the 6 majors are in there. They're down there. You've got the plumbing, you've got the heating and the cooling, you've got the electric, and then obviously you've got the walls. So we want to talk just today about the walls, the actual structure of the home.
of the basement.
But that's where you spend a lot of time. I mean, think about it. The foundation is the first thing that is laid, and the rest of the house is built on top of that.
Okay, Scott. So we're going to go in. We're going to talk about the structure today of a home from the basement perspective, the feet or the legs of the house.
Yeah.
So you have the walls, you have the beam that comes in the, right across the middle of the house.
Yep.
And then you have posts that hold that beam up, which is holding the rest of the house up.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. Let's talk about the walls. Like, what are we going to see in basement walls? What types of walls, and why? And
why does it matter?
Educate us.
Yeah. So there's really, there's 3 different types of walls that we're going to see here in Western New York. Okay. And it's going to really depend largely on the age of the home. So I tell everybody there's 3 big ways that people built basements. 120 plus years ago, they used stone. So they literally would take stone and slap them on top of each other with a whole bunch of mortar. And when you walk into a basement, now this tends to be, we live in Buffalo, so you go in the city of Buffalo, or maybe you're a little bit further out and you're looking at a farmhouse that was built sometime in the 1800s. You're going to see these stone basements. And in general, they're damp. Okay. So if you're looking for your cream of the crop, I want to finish my basement and, put a bathroom in there and a living area, you're probably not going to do that in a house that's got a stone foundation. The stone just naturally is porous and water comes in. In fact, very much more often than not, when I go into a stone foundation home, I see a little trench that goes all along the perimeter of the house, and it's pitched towards a drain. Because they built these homes knowing, hey, listen, water's going to get in here, but we're just trying to take that water and send it over to that drain so that it goes out of the house. Okay. So when I'm educating people about this, I tell them, guys, this basement will never be bone dry. It's not bad. The house is over 100 years old. It's not falling over. It's not falling in. But you got to understand that that's a characteristic of a stone basement. Sometimes you might even have dirt floors.
We cannot eliminate water from the planet, right?
No.
But we can manage the flow of water. And so that's what the intent was behind a stone wall basement, was how do we deal with water? Because it's going to seep through a stone foundation. And the mortar is going to wear at a different pace than the actual stone itself, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Stone's going to last a lot longer than the mortar will.
For sure.
So, but stone basements can do their job very well. It's just not going to traditionally end as a finished basement area, although there are some exceptions to that.
Right.
So what else? What else are we going to find?
So if you moved up in age, right, and you started looking at a house that was maybe built, 1930, 1940, 1950, 60, you're going to see what's called a block foundation. And this is very common. It's literally cinder blocks laid on top of each other with mortar. Okay. This was the way that they built homes, back when wartime capes were being built in the 40s and 50s. They were laying down block foundations. Now, block foundations are still prevalent in a lot of other areas of the country. Typically here now in Buffalo, Western New York, if you're doing a new build, they're not going to use block because of the extreme weather that we experience and the way that the water in the ground expands. We don't really build with block anymore, but there are lots of times where somebody might put up an addition and they might make it a block foundation because of the cost.
Right.
So it's not like it's uncommon to see an addition be block. It's not bad. It's not anything to worry about. But in general, if you were going to go build a new home in 2022, it wouldn't be a block foundation. It would be what's called a poured foundation, which we'll get into that next. But the block walls are good in some ways, but in some ways they also have some negatives to them. And so one of the things, again, we're talking about water, right? Everybody doesn't want water in their basement. Everything that a house does, we're trying to keep the water away, right? You got gutters. It's designed that when the rain falls from the sky and it lands on the roof, it goes down into the gutter, and then the downspout takes it away from the house.
That's right.
So we want to be
good.
thinking
That's
about that. Hey, that's how the house is built. We don't want water in the basement. Well, a long time ago when they built these houses, we just didn't have as good of knowledge as we do about water and how it expands and contracts when it freezes and then thaws. We didn't have maybe necessarily the best understanding about, hey, where are we going to put a driveway in relation to the house? Should we put it right up against it? Should we leave a little bit of space? What's that going to do to the foundation? And even sometimes the grading of literally, here's the foundation. Does the soil go away, down? Or is the soil built up and the water flow is going to actually pitch into the foundation? So things like that affect the foundation, that when they built these houses and then noticed that there could be problems with them, they actually would do this thing called drill a weeping hole. And so sometimes when you go into a block foundation basement and you look right at the base, maybe 2 inches up from the ground, you're going to see little hole drilled in the block. And that might be every handful of feet, because back in the day, they said, hey, listen, we realize that we don't want water in this block because it's porous. It's absorbing water from the outside ground. The ground obviously holds water.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happens when that water goes into the block and it sits there and it literally has nowhere else to go? Well, in the wintertime, right, it expands. It freezes and it expands. And then in the summertime, it melts and it contracts. And it does that over and over and over and over for years and years and years. And if you've got other problems such as bad grading, not good gutters, not good downspouts, you've got a driveway that's backed right onto the actual foundation so that when there's snow and ice, it melts, it doesn't go into the ground, it just sits on the driveway and goes into the foundation. You've got all these ways that water could get in, and it wreaks havoc on the block. And so what starts to happen, and I'm going to try to show you guys in the best way that I can. If you see my hand, right, it's straight. This would be the best way that you would want your block foundation to look. But if you thought about it, I mean, John, if you push on my hand and you just start to push, you're the ground. Well, look at my hand. It's bending in, right? It's bending in. It's not moving.
So my hand would be at grade level from the earth, right? Or a little bit below.
Here's all the living space, and here's the actual foundation. So it's just
earth
pushing
in here because the water that sits in the ground expands when it freezes, and it puts pressure on the earth. Now
we call that hydrostatic pressure.
Yeah, and the different geology too in the ground is important. So we have a lot of clay in areas of Western New York, and the clay can be a problem because the clay will hold that water. And it gets much denser than regular soil, okay? And so it's really, really important that if you're building a house, a block foundation where there's clay, you better make sure you don't backfill, because when they clear it out, they build the foundation, then they have to backfill that dirt up against the wall, that you're not backfilling it with more clay.
Not good.
Because you're going to cause bowing will occur in that wall if you're backfilling that with clay. And they didn't know that when they were doing it back then. So when we're showing homes that are built in the the 40s and 50s that have these block foundations in certain areas where we have a lot of clay, you may see bowed walls. Now, talk a little bit about how they build the block wall. And the mortar has cracks all the way around each cinder block. But when you begin to build a wall together, you have horizontal lines in the wall and you have vertical lines. And explain the problem that these can occur and why.
So when you've got a block foundation, what you're going to find in terms of the cracks, obviously the weakest part of the wall, if we were to think about it, it's built with the block and the mortar. The mortar is going to be the weakest part. The block itself, unless you've got crazy problems going on, the block itself is not really going to crack. It's just going to move as the mortar gives way. So we've got what we call stair step cracks, which might be a little, down, over, down, over, down, over, down, over.
Just follows the mortar line down.
It follows the mortar
down.
line. Yeah. And, that's relatively common. I've seen that a lot of times in homes. Not something that you should necessarily be super concerned about. In general, most cracks are not very, very concerning, but you want to keep an eye on it and try to get to the bottom of why that crack is actually occurring. It's not just occurring for no reason, right? I mean, there's a reason. So you want to find out the reason.
Yes, enormous amount of pressure and stress on the wall.
Right. So that's one type of crack. But the bigger type of crack that you should really be concerned about is a horizontal crack. And so, as we talked about, when you've got all that pressure on the wall and it starts to just bow it in, you'll then see along that line running sometimes the whole entire width of the basement, you've got a crack. And you start to see the wall kind of smile at you. It's kind of, it's
the crack
out.
opens up.
The crack opens up. Yeah.
What's interesting is that crack goes all the way across. Horizontal lines go all the way across. At every level of a block, you have these horizontal lines that go straight across.
Yeah.
So when the pressure comes on the house, you'll see the stress on that is going to show itself in the horizontal cracks first. That's the weakest part, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the vertical lines, the step cracking you're talking about, each block that goes, they're kind of put together a little bit more like a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
And they hold each other in place a little bit more, right?
Right. So when you've got these, this horizontal crack that's running the length of your basement, to be fair, it doesn't mean, oh my gosh, the house is going to fall down. I mean, perfect example. I sold a ranch house last year that had 2 cracks that were running along the length of the basement wall. It was a block foundation. It was a great house, fantastic brick ranch that had bowing on one basement wall. So the client wanted just some reassurance that, hey, is this thing going to fall in on me? Great. We got a structural engineer out there. Structural engineer checked it out and said, you will be dead before you got to worry about this block wall falling in on you.
Yeah.
This thing is fine. They do all these calculations.
1/77th of an inch per year of movement.
Yeah.
After its original settling.
Right.
So if we're looking at a house that maybe is built in 50 or 60 or 70 and has a block wall foundation, usually the most part of that movement will have occurred in the first 10 years.
Right.
So if it's an old bowing, you're usually going to see about 1/77th of an inch of movement per year. Now you do the math. Okay. You do the math.
77 years.
The earth might not be here.
One. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So, cracks aren't necessarily bad. Even a bowing wall is not necessarily bad. But let's say that it does happen to be bad. You can get what we call pilasters. I mean, there's 2 ways to fix this, right? You could go with the more expensive route and you could jack up your house.
Before you get into the pilaster thing, let's talk real quick about some of the things that could happen with these bowing walls. If you have a wall and it's like this high, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now from the side angle, it begins to bow. Now you have this going on, right? And the wall bows. What happens is now whatever it's holding up above it, it's not holding up as firmly.
Sure.
So it could cause other problems, structural problems, particularly if it's a brick ranch or a brick colonial or a brick cape. You might now go outside and see some step cracking in the mortar and the brick.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Because now it's
like a domino effect.
Yeah, it's a domino effect.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
The other issue sometimes is you're going to see water seepage, because we talk about the water and a block wall. It'll come right through. The cinder block walls are hollow on the inside, right?
Yep.
And so the water seeps in there from the sill plate if it's not covered right, or from cracking on the outside of the water. Water will find the path of least resistance and begin to fill up. Then that's an issue, because if it begins to bow and crack and the water gets that high, it'll just seep right in and pour down the wall.
Yep.
Or by a basement window in a block foundation, you'll sometimes see the weeping coming down on the wall just from the moisture.
Yeah. Right.
It doesn't have to be pouring water. It's just it'll condensate, and you'll have a tremendous amount of moisture coming onto the inside of your house. So if you're finishing a basement wall right up against a block wall, well, that could be a little bit of an issue because it's going to put stress on that wall you're building on the inside for a good finished look.
Right.
But also moisture and wetness. So you really want to, like, if you're finishing a basement with a block wall, you want to pull that in a little bit.
Yeah, give it some breathing space.
Yeah.
So that you could get behind it.
Yes.
So even if it's a foot.
So some of the ways that we fix the block walls, though, you were beginning to say.
Right. So, let's say that you determine that you want to fix the block wall. Well, obviously you can do what would be the most expensive route, which is you
rebuild the whole wall.
Rebuild the whole wall. Jack up the house, tear the wall out, rebuild it, right?
In most cases, completely unnecessary.
Yeah, most people won't do that. What you will do is a very fine, very cost-effective fix, which is called a pilaster. And to put it real simply, you might have seen this in houses that you've been into, and people don't even really realize it. They just think it's like part of the house. It's literally a steel beam that is laid up against the wall. So let's say you've got your bowing wall, right? Your wall's bowing in here, and you just put a beam up against it. And this steel beam is literally designed to just hold the wall in place.
Yeah.
And it's done properly. I've seen pilasters that the person did it themselves and it's not doing anything.
Yeah. So the pilaster really has to go into the ground.
Yeah. It has to be cemented, anchored in.
And then it has to be securely bolted
to the
right
actual
up
flooring,
to
the joists.
the joists of the house. So you have that stability.
Yeah.
And then those pilasters are designed to go in anywhere from 6 to 12 feet, but traditionally 8 feet apart to secure a wall from further movement.
Right.
And most of the time, because the walls are only going to move 1/77th of an inch per year, typically, there are exceptions to that, but
sure.
But you usually don't, you don't need them. You don't really need them. Okay.
Yeah.
Now there are rare cases where, nobody ever did anything with the wall. It's causing all kinds of other problems, domino effect, as you said, and you got to either rebuild the wall or you got to put those pilasters in to stop that problem from happening,
right?
And to secure the home,
right?
So those are block walls. Let's move on to poured walls.
Yeah.
Now poured walls are really the preference today. The most technologically advanced secure wall is a poured concrete wall. And over time, we stepped into different types of poured walls. So back in, literally in the 60s, they would start building poured block walls. So they were big squares and they were butted right up against each other, no mortar. And then they started doing columns of poured, and then they have just complete poured wall all the way across now. And then even in the corners, sometimes you'll see rounded corners.
Yeah.
That gives a lot of extra structural support because you get one wall's built this way, and then you get another wall that's built up against it. And then that those could have movement sliding up and down, but you want to merge those two and round those corners. It gives a tremendous amount, very, very high-tech engineering feat that was developed with that.
I love seeing those in houses.
Yeah.
The rounded corners are cool.
Yeah.
And, it's important too. We were talking about the block wall, how they're hollow. Well, now these poured walls, they've got rebar in them.
Yeah.
There's rebar and then the concrete's poured around them. So these things are super, super strong.
Yeah.
Super strong. The ideal basement that you want to, finish.
Yeah.
And again, cracks are normal. It's going to happen. Every house is going to have a crack, guys. Keep that in mind.
With poured walls, you are going to have stress fracturing going on.
Yep.
The question is, what type of cracks and fracturing are good or normal?
Yeah.
Not a concern.
Mm-hmm.
And what are serious concerns?
Right.
And this is really what separates someone from knowing what they're talking about and someone who doesn't.
Yeah.
And this is why education on these majors is critically important.
It's huge.
If you have a poured basement wall and you go into that wall, you're showing the house, or I go in to get a house ready for sale, and it has a horizontal crack in a poured wall, I'm running.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, not literally, but
It's a concern.
It's a big concern.
It's not
that
common.
wall
Yeah.
needs to be redone.
Yep.
It may need pilasters, okay, as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you have definitely an issue, and you're going to likely have a leakage problem.
Yeah.
As well,
Yep.
because the water that comes through the cracks on a poured wall does it, at a higher rate than it does through a block wall, even. Okay. So even though the block wall is more porous, those cracks tend to open up and let water in. Because the poured wall is not as porous, the water's going to take the path of least resistance.
Yeah, it's all
and it'll
channeled.
find its way to the crack, and then it'll all come through the crack, right?
Yeah.
So if you have that, you're going to have some of those cracks sometimes will leak for anywhere from, $500 or $600 on the low end to $1,400 or $1,500 on the high end. You can get a contractor to come in and repair a crack with a lifetime warranty that will drill through the crack, drill a hole in the ground, and redirect the water, and then patch it with like an epoxy.
Yep.
And fix that crack. It's most cracks that are vertical now, we're talking fracturing vertical, even if they're leaking water, does not mean you have a structural problem.
No.
Okay?
Not at all.
So most people don't understand this. So this is the biggest thing when we're looking at poured basements, right? Now, where do we see most cracks and fracturing going on in a poured basement?
Most of them, it's right where the window is. So your glass block window,
or a regular window,
or your regular window, you unhook it, crank it up. That's going to be the weakest part of the foundation. And so it's very common on the corners of the window. You'll see right on the corner a little crack that goes down. Sometimes it goes all the way to the floor. Maybe it goes 2 feet down.
Yeah.
Super common. I mean, if I walk into a poured basement and there's like 3 windows and I don't see a crack on one of them, I'm genuinely surprised.
So I remember when I was a little kid and I was playing baseball, and I swung the bat, and the pitcher threw it, and I literally swung right into the ball, and the ball hit my hand, hit my finger, and I thought I broke my finger, So I went they took me to the hospital to get X-rays, and they said, "You have a hairline fracture."
Right.
I said, "Well, what does that mean?" I didn't know as a kid what that meant.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it's not a compound break. It's not where the bone just separated apart. It's where the bone has a little crack, and that hairline crack means that it might not go all the way through the bone. Okay. There's
just
all
on the
different
surface.
types, just on the surface. Right. So, we don't know the depth, that kind of thing. So you're going to see that kind of fracturing going on in poured basement walls. They're like bone, right?
Yep.
So, you'll see them sometimes too on the beam, where the beam comes across a basement and it's sitting on top of the wall.
Yeah.
At the corner of where those beams are, you'll see little cracks there too.
Super common. Yep.
Now let's talk. Let's give the audience finishing up here on this basement stuff on the walls before we get to the beams and posts. But quickly, let's talk about transverse cracks.
Yeah. So a transverse crack is a crack that, you're in a basement and you see on one side, typically near the middle, you'll see a crack going down, right? And if you were standing and looking directly at that crack and you turned around and you looked behind you and there's another crack right in the same area. So it's on
the other side
on
of the
the
house.
other side, two walls opposite each other, and you've got the same crack going down. What does that mean, John?
It means the house is going like this.
Yeah. So you've literally got it settling downward, and the pressure on both sides of the wall is causing a crack.
That's right.
That's a concern.
Yeah, that is a concern. So usually it goes with the beam of the house. So if the beam is coming straight across, sometimes looking under or near the beam, depending on where it's at. Okay. If it's opposite the beam, okay, then the beam is going to take more stress. Okay. If you think about it, right?
Yep.
But if you're walking along a basement wall and you get a third of the way in to the other third and you see a crack, we will absolutely be more thoroughly examining right across from that to make sure that this isn't a transverse crack that's going all the way through the house. Now, these cracks sometimes can be noticed on the outside. When we do our outside of the house walk around, we're looking also at the foundation. So if you're walking halfway down the house or across the house and you see a crack in the foundation, you got to remember that when you get to the opposite side of that house.
Right.
And if you see another crack there, you're going to note that. And then when you get into the basement, you're going to really examine that to see if those cracks are coming through the thickness of the wall.
Yeah.
Like I talked about with the bone, how I hurt my finger, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if if that crack comes all the way through the thickness of the wall, it is not a hairline fracture, right?
Yeah. That's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
So
yeah,
those are cracks that are going to tend to leak water. Those are cracks that could turn into structural problems. But typically speaking, it is very, very rare to walk into a house that has a poured basement anywhere and not see some sort of fracturing going on.
Right.
Hairline cracks.
Very common.
I could take you into thousands, hundreds, thousands of homes and show you this. So there's no need to get bent out of shape about some cracks. Now there are some others. So it's important to get that education. And this is why we take this approach, folks.
You got to know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
You got to know.
So we have a couple different types of beams.
Sure. So obviously you've got the outside walls, right? Well, then there's a beam that runs down the middle of your house, and that's what's holding up the entire middle part, right? If you didn't have a beam in your house, your floors are going to sag. My first house didn't have a beam, and it literally sagged a little bit. So you older homes, you're going to find a wood beam, just a bunch of pieces of wood cisterned together, running down the length. You more commonly, especially in newer homes, will see a steel beam, just a steel I-beam, and obviously held up with posts. So when we're looking at these posts that are holding up the beam, we literally will tap our finger on them, because we want to hear a nice clean ring in the post.
Why? You play music or something? I know you're a drummer, dude.
Well, you know what? I will play a little beat on them typically.
Yeah, okay.
But we're doing it for a reason, and that's because you want to figure out what the structural integrity of the post is. So obviously that post goes all the way down into the ground. It's cemented into the footer of the house. And you want to make sure that water seepage under the actual foundation of the home
really
hasn't rotted out the post. And so if you knock on it and you get a thud, it's very dense. There's no ring. It's like
that post is likely sitting in water.
Well, not necessarily water, but it's just absorbed moisture over time. And so eventually you'll see this in a very, very extreme example where I can look at posts and the bottom has corrosion all on it, and you can actually see holes.
But what does that corrosion come from?
Moisture,
water, right?
Moisture.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, basements have moisture. It's not like you're not going to see it. And no post in a home lasts forever. I mean, I've been in homes that have steel posts, and I go down at the bottom and I can see that there's corrosion, even to the point where you start to see these little holes. And so, listen, the structural integrity of this is compromised.
A basement floor that's poured in a basement and it's got significant cracking in that floor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because we know that there's hydrostatic pressure from the water underneath the house. The water table in the earth exists.
Oh, yeah.
And if the water is coming from the sides of the house and flowing underneath the house, okay, and then it freezes, it's expanding, it's pushing up on that basement floor.
Yep.
So if you want to know if you have a lot of water underneath your house, you're going to be able to tell that by those posts.
Yeah.
Because those posts are going through the basement floor. And if they're really either sitting there in water or such high moisture, those posts are not going to ring like a ding, ding.
Yeah.
It's going to be like I'm
more
hitting
of
my
a thud.
Cup,
yeah.
A thud.
Right.
So good little tricks here. The market dominators are dropping some knowledge today.
Yep. It's important.
I love it. You are listening to the Market Dominators Real Estate Podcast on the Market Dominators Team YouTube channel. We highly encourage you to like and subscribe.
Check it out.
Yes.
Check it out. Link in the description.
And just so you know, if you haven't heard, breaking news last week was announced that Jim Roberts, the owner of Metro Roberts Realty, and the Market Dominators have agreed to terms to work together. We are now at Metro Roberts Realty. We are so excited. The fastest growing real estate company in Western New York, and the Market Dominators are, we're going to come and we're, through what we do, educate, advocate, negotiate, and dominate. We're going to just bring that whole effort to a whole nother level at Metro Roberts Realty. We want to thank our clients for an incredible
bowling night.
Bowling
Our
night,
bowling night, we had a
family
ton of fun.
client appreciation event where we handed out tons of Market Dominator swag and just an opportunity to love on our clients. Treat them to some food and drink and some dessert and giveaways and contests and prizes, and just get together and have the clients see one another and meet one another, and
it was a good time.
And then hear from the Dominators again.
Yeah.
So So listen, you've been tuning in. We're thankful. We're grateful. We're wildly grateful for you. We have gone through now 3 of the 6 majors, the 3 structural of a house, the head, the torso, and the feet of a house. Next week, we will begin on the mechanicals.
Yep.
So we'll talk about the nervous system of the house, the electrical system, the digestive system, the plumbing system, and the breathing system, the part that regulates the temperature in a home, the heating and sometimes cooling of a home. And we'll take 3 weeks to do that. So stay tuned. And remember, like and subscribe to the Market Dominators team on YouTube, where you can find all kinds of educational content, and some of it will be fun, right? Funny and fun, because it's not just our weekly podcasts here. So with that, folks, we just want to say, have an awesome day. Have an awesome week out there. And until the next time,
see you soon.